Well, when you think of Australian food culture, you might imagine meat pies and Vegemite, but our culinary history actually runs a whole lot deeper than that. And at the middle of the melting pot was the Australian Women's Weekly.
Long before Google, their cookbooks and magazines brought inspiration to family mealtime, opened our eyes to multicultural flavours and helped celebrate life's big occasions.
Now a new project is taking readers back through time, doing a deep dive into everything from dinner to dessert and even diet culture to uncover the recipes that made Aussie kitchens unique.
Dr. Lauren Samuelsson is a food historian and author of A Matter of Taste. Lovely to see you.
Great to be here.
This book started as your PhD project, so you've done a heap of research into this, and Australian food often gets a bad rap. What were the most surprising things that you learned in your research?
So lots of people think that Australian food is pretty boring. You know, meat and 3 veg, and the veg has usually been boiled within an inch of its life. But what my research has sort of shown is that people were actually really interested in trying new things long before we sort of think that they would have been. So they were there trying Chinese food in the 1930s and really getting into the kitchen and having a go.
Great, and I love that you've brought in all these cookbooks. You explored some weird and wonderful dishes. So can we start with jelly? Like, what was our fascination with jelly?
Yeah, the fascination with jelly sort of started a long time ago. It was really, really difficult to make. And so if you could have jelly, it meant that you had a servant who was there boiling up bones and things and doing all of the tough work. And then we gradually got things like instant gelatin and all of that sort of stuff, but that sort of idea that it was quite fancy remained. And so throughout the 20th century, we see all sorts of different jellies, and they're not sort of the jellies that we think of, which are usually sweet. They were often savoury, and they were a way to sort of show not only how classy you were, but also it could help you extend leftovers. You could just pop everything inside a jelly. Bob's your uncle.
Right. We couldn't talk about Australian Women's Weekly, of course, without talking about the birthday cakes. So very popular. Why do you think they've stood the test of time? People still go back to the cakes they learned how to make from these magazines decades ago.
Yeah, the birthday cake book came out in 1980, so, you know, a good 40 years ago.
Yeah.
40, oh gosh, even longer. And so it really has stood the test of time, and people tend to go back to it because this book came out at a really important time when kids' birthday parties and, like, the importance of kids and having their own sort of self-expression came about. And so we've got these cakes that so many kids could go through and they'd be like, oh, I'm really interested in trains, or I like ballet, and your mum would make you a cake that sort of reflected that.
So it's got more to do with us sort of celebrating kids,
right,
rather than just the cookbook. Oh, that's fascinating. Love it or loathe it, diet culture is huge, was huge. Over the years, the magazine has promoted a whole range of fad diets. There was diet competitions. What did you learn about that?
So you'd be surprised, but our diet culture hasn't changed too much over the last 50 or so years. There have been fad diets around, lots of them with crazy names, just like we have today. You know, there was the Chinese yum yum diet or the spaghetti diet that you could go on. But they were often really restrictive, and really it was about losing weight and not necessarily dieting for health, which I think we've sort of seen more of a change towards the idea of health now.
There's the Israeli army diet. I remember my aunties going on the Israeli army diet.
Yeah. How'd that work out?
Yeah.
We've always been heavily influenced by food from all over the world. What can you tell us about Mrs. Wu as one of the contributors? So
Mrs. Wu was the wife of a Chinese governmental official who was over here in Australia after the Second World War. And she was one of many women, many Chinese women, who shared recipes in the weekly and introduced Australians to what was authentic Chinese food, or as authentic as it could be in 1950s Australia. And it really sort of kick-started our love of Chinese cuisine, which has obviously stuck around and is one of the foods that we really love the most.
Yeah, we sure do. You've brought in some old magazines and cookbooks here. Can you show us some of these early editions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I've got a couple here. So this one and this one are from 1972. So we've got Cooking for Couples and the Busy Woman's Cookbook, which is my favourite because look how stunning she is.
And they're hardcover too.
Yeah. So they are fantastic. And then this one, I think many people will be familiar with, which is the Barbecue barbecue cookbook, which was renamed because of the famous Paul Hogan ad, you know, the shrimp on the barbie. So that one came out in like 1984. And then this one, which I think...
We had that. My mum had that.
Probably one of the ones that is most quintessentially known by Australians as well.
Mum also had this one, and she had the one that you've got next to you as well. Like, I recognise them.
Really interesting. Thank you for joining us this morning.
No problem.
Great to see you.
Amazing.
And Dr. Lauren Samuelsson's book, A Matter of Taste, is out right now. It sounds great.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Back after this.